Top 5 weird specs from Classic WoW. What is this? It's Meta Goblin. God damn. The weirdest spec that I have ever seen is from Classic WoW. Spell Power Hunter. That's basically it. Hunter that is using all cloth gear. I don't know if it's for like Serpent's thing or what is the purpose of it, but it's just like he's having all cloth pieces on him while he should actually get agility, so he's getting crit and attack power. That's the most important attribute for Hunter. So I'm gonna be kind of disappointed if I'm not gonna see that one over here.
Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be counting down the top 5 weird specs from Classic WoW. Just before we jump in guys, if you like my videos then do consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Been talking to a few people in the comments and apparently a lot of people didn't realise they weren't subscribed to the channel even though they watch my videos like every week, so it does really help out. But anyway, let's get on with it.
Subscribe to Meta.
So the first build I have for you is the Rogue Ghost build. I've talked about this build before because I kind of invented it back when I was leveling when Classic WoW was actually released, although I'm not claiming that I'm like the architect of this build. I'm sure people have used this build before me, but nonetheless what it does is it focuses on avoidance and increasing your defensive capabilities rather than focusing on your offensive capabilities and increasing your DPS. And what I found was when I was leveling, it was a very efficient leveling build simply by the fact I was taking much less damage. And it was also very good at soloing elites, dealing with multiple enemies and just difficult encounters like that, and even soloing a few things in dungeons whether I wanted to do a certain dungeon quest on my own without doing a group. And overall I just found it like way more fun, primarily because you get an extra ability to use called Ghostly Strike, and that's where it gets its name from. So Ghostly Strike does 125% of weapon damage and also increases your chance to dodge by 15% for 7 seconds. So first of all, this ability is really cool, gives you a cool animation and it makes some rotation more interesting. And secondly, if you're got a fairly slow weapon, it actually does more damage than Sinister Strike, and that increase to your dodge chance means that you can get up to about 60% avoidance when you use Ghostly Strike, which obviously massively reduces the damage that you take. Other key talents that I used were Lightning Reflexes and Deflection to increase your avoidance by an extra 10%, which was really nice. I've also got Riposte, which was really useful if you're dealing with enemies who actually have weapons, and it's also a really cheeky DPS boost simply by the fact that it actually does 150% weapon damage and barely costs any energy.
A strike that becomes active after parrying an opponent's attack. This attack deals 150% weapon damage and disarms the target for 6 seconds. So basically it's a free disarm. Very useful.
And I also picked up mace specialization because if you're dual wielding maces, this does actually proc a lot and it's a 3-second stun, and while the enemy is stunned they're not doing any damage to you. So that's really nice. And around about level 40 you can get the weapon called Wirt's Third Leg very cheaply off the auction house. I got it for like 2 gold, I bought 2 of them, enchanted them both, and it was doing like ridiculous damage, and again this mace specialization was a really useful talent. And apart from this you pick up all the kind of typical talents like Blade Flurry, and you probably want to swap to Soul specialization in the later levels when you're leveling. Yeah, you just pick up like the typical damage increasing combat talents. But anyway, let's move on to number 2 because we have the Warlock Tank build. So the Warlock Tank build focuses on stacking as much damage reduction as humanly possible and then throwing in a little bit of cheeky self-healing into the build too. With a few key talents you can very easily stack up to about 70% damage reduction, which is pretty ridiculous.
This kinda makes sense because Warlock is having so much issues with the threat. Warlock's threat, even though he doesn't deal so much DPS, his threat is just all over the place, all over. So he can easily be like number 1 on the threat meter. So this spec kind of makes sense, but at the same time Warlock is a clothy. So yeah.
You can very easily solo elites in dungeons, or in the open world to make money, or tank in dungeons, maybe even in raids if you really want to be that bold. Nonetheless, it is a very strong tanking build. The first key talent we have is Soul Link, which reduces the amount of damage that you take by 30% because that damage is transferred to your pet instead.
Yeah.
And then we also have Master Demonologist, which reduces the physical damage you take by an extra 10%. So that's like a flat 40% damage reduction just from your talents, and it's going to stack with your armor rating and also Demon Shield. We also have talents like Demonic Embrace, a little bit of extra stamina, improved health stone for obvious reasons. Then we have talents which kind of boost the damage and the threat of the Voidwalker, because what you're going to be doing is you kind of buff the defensive capabilities of the Voidwalker and also his ability to kind of ping pong aggro between you and the Voidwalker, because sometimes if you're taking too much damage or the Voidwalker is taking too much damage, what you're going to have to do is kind of ping pong the aggro in order to survive. So what's really, if you play this build correctly, you essentially have 2 tanks. And then apart from this, we have improved drain life and fel concentration.
The healers need to be healing also the Warlock and also the Voidwalker, because when the Warlock is gonna getting hit, the Voidwalker is also taking DPS, is taking damage, so they basically need to heal like 2 tanks at the same time. But yeah, it's a crazy build, goddamn.
Which allows you to just spam cast Drain Life in order to keep yourself alive. And then we also have Nightfall, which means that because you have your dots on the target, and when you're spamming Drain Life, it basically doubles the chance for Nightfall to proc, which is actually a pretty ridiculous damage increase, because it's just going to proc pretty much like at least every 10 seconds, probably even less sometimes. And obviously the damage is instant, and you don't have to hard cast a Shadow Bolt or anything like that, so it is a really useful DPS ability, DPS talent for when you are face tanking. You can also use the PvP gloves bonus, which reduces the amount of cast interruption you get when you're casting Searing Pain by 50%, which massively
Bro, so he probably has the tanking trinket. God damn.
Increases your capability to tank dungeons and raid bosses. And lastly, the set is further improved by the Nemesis gear, tier 2 gear, because it also provides pretty decent amount of health per second. For number 3, we have a Shaman Tank build, which is a bit of a fun build that you can use for flag carrying, since Shamans are pretty good at flag carrying because of Ghost Wolf and actually have a lot of really cool defensive talents. And it can...
I just don't understand, how is he gonna like maintain the aggro? That's the biggest question for me.
Be used in dungeons for tanking very easily, maybe as a temporary off-tank in raiding environments. What you'll notice if you look in the enhancement tree, it's very strange, but there's a number of tanking talents which feel more like warrior talents in the tree, like shield specialization, anticipation, toughness, and the parry talent, which obviously are really strong defensive talents. Shaman was actually originally intended to be a bit of a tank build. It just needs a little bit of extra oomph for it to actually become a actual viable raiding tank. I mean, threat is never really much of an issue because you have Earth Shock, which does like double the amount of threat generation than most abilities. You have Rock Biter weapon, which generates a lot of threat. You also...
Oh, Rock Biter weapon, yeah, I forgot. So you are not using Wind Fury, but you're using Rock Biter. God damn, and spamming Earth Shocks.
Have really cool, awesome talents like Stone Skim Totem, which reduces the amount of damage you take. And you've got Stone Claw Totem, which is an AoE taunt, which is quite interesting. Shamans actually have an AoE taunt. And you've got Earthbind for kiting. You've got Fire Nova Totem for really awesome AoE threat. I mean, threat is never an issue. They just, again, need that little bit of extra defensive capabilities in order for them to actually become a pretty strong main tank. At the moment, they're more of a casual dungeon tank, flag carrier, and then maybe very temporary raid tank. For number 4, we have the Melee Hunter. Now, there's a...
What the freak? Melee Hunter?
A few different versions of the Melee Hunter. You know, there's a few niche leveling builds, alternative PvP builds, where this guy... dual wielding Dragon's Call and spamming wing clip to get like a stampede of little green dragons, which is pretty cool. But the most common melee tanking build is actually a pretty popular one now, and it's called the Melee Weaving Raid build. It's actually quite a viable way of increasing your DPS in a raiding environment, and a few...
Oh, so your DPS from the range, and then you're gonna be just like coming in, raptor strike, wing clip, and then you're going back and doing regular DPS. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting.
Professional, very skilled hunters out there actually consider it to be a DPS increase over, you know, more standard raid build. So as you may know, in the hunter's rotation there is a little bit of downtime, and essentially what you do in the downtime of the rotation is you go into melee range, sneak in a little raptor strike, maybe a wing clip, a little melee hit, maybe even a trap between your auto shots and the downtime of your rotation. And what people have found is it's actually pretty decent DPS increasing in trick in raid. And even if you're not using it to increase your raid DPS, it is actually pretty useful if you've totally run out of mana to weave in and out of a range shot and a melee shot to actually increase your DPS without using any mana consuming abilities. Obviously it is a bit of a pain in the backside to actually pull off and requires a lot of practice because it requires absolutely perfect timing, but in some fights it actually will increase your DPS, but in other fights it's probably not worth doing at all. There isn't that much of a difference when it comes to the talents. You pretty much will just use a standard raiding build, although you're going to dip a little toe into the survival tree and pick up Savage Strikes, which increase your critical strike chance of Raptor Strike and Mongoose Bite by a total of 20%, because the Raptor Strike crits, particularly when you get a hunter weapon like 8ish, you are going to be doing some pretty ridiculous Raptor Strike critical strikes.
Wait, hunter weapons like 8ish? 8ish is caster weapon. What do you mean?
And lastly, we have number 5, which is going to be the Smite Priest. So the Smite Priest is a hybrid healing and DPS build. If you've ever played League of Legends, it's very similar to the hero called Soraka, who kind of does a lot of healing and buffing and also a fairly decent amount of damage herself, and that's what this build is all about. It's very useful in PvP because it has such a strong adaptive playstyle. If your team needs healing, you can do really good healing. If your team doesn't really need that much healing, then you can help out with the damage. If a warrior or a mage is going absolutely ham, then you can buff him with power infusion to increase his damage by like 20%, and you're overall just a really extremely useful player to have in a pretty typical pre-made PvP group.
I think Smite Priest is a really viable choice because, as Metagoblin mentioned, you can be healing a lot, but at the same time you can be more offensive. So yeah, basically like a standard Wrath of the Lich King Priest. Because in Wrath of the Lich King, in many games, in arenas and battlegrounds, Priest is actually very offensive because he can be obviously even in classic, because he can be doing offensive dispels. So let's say that you are pushing, he's dispelling, like let's say Ice Barrier, dispelling also the warrior at the same time, and pushing a little bit of the DPS there as well. Very viable choice.
Most builds that I've seen will go deep into Discipline and dip a little toe into Holy, pick up talents like Syrian Light to increase your damage with Smite, Holy Reach to increase your range for obvious reasons, a little bit of cheeky Holy Nova because that's actually pretty good if you can't cast. Got Blessed Recovery for a little bit of extra defensive capability. You obviously pick up Power Infusion. You've also got Force of Will stacked with Holy Specialization to increase your crit chance by 10%, and then you can stack that with Inner Focus for a total of 35 increased critical, chance to get a critical hit. A little bit of defensive bonuses with improved Inner Fire, and just general talents that increase your defensive capabilities, and talents more tailored for PvP. You've also got the Martyrdom talent, which is very useful for hard casting your smites. And if you look at footage on YouTube, a lot of people are making PvP videos out there and doing ridiculous damage with Smite and Holy Fire. So I can definitely see the viability and the strength of this build. I honestly think it's probably one of the most useful PvP
Did mage get destroyed?
builds to bring into a pre-made. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. My name is Metagoblin. Until my next video. Ciao.
So other specs that I've seen. As I mentioned before, I've seen spell damage Hunter. Hunter decked out in the base spell damage gear, from helmet, rings, trinkets, the weapons, and obviously some just like some regular bow. I don't know what is the purpose of it. If he's like, is Serpent Sting is like so strong, or what is the purpose of it? But I have seen it on the vanilla server that I was playing. So I don't know, maybe you can write me something in the comments if you have seen spell damage Hunter in classic WoW. Other interesting spec that I think is very viable, Shokadin. Paladin Shokadin. What it basically means, you should have a Thunder Fury, by the way, for this to be really viable. But in a nutshell, you should be having Judgment gear, and or obviously you can also have like, so Judgment gear is having spell damage and healing, which is really good for like holy shocks deep offensively. But it's also possible to play it with T3, which is solely based on the healing. So your main parts, helm, shoulders, chest, and should be for example T3, which is just healing based. But your off parts, neck, back, rings, should be more offensively based. So just spell damage and healing. And when you have a Thunder Fury and you're gonna be basically just doing the proc, because of your extra spell damage, Thunder Fury is gonna be dealing a lot of DPS. And with your Holy Shock, you're adding another DPS there as well, and with your Judgment, another more DPS there as well. But at the same time, you can be really strongly healing yourself, and you're healing everyone as well. So it's kind of like a similar build to the Smite Priest. With the Shokanin build, you can be offensive, but at the same time you can be healing your raid a lot. And that's why I actually think it's really viable. I saw it on a private server that I was playing, vanilla, and it's really strong. And because Holy Paladins are strong in general, and if they can be offensive, then it's very strong. It's not gonna be as strong as Elemental Shaman, but it's definitely gonna be kind of scary if he's gonna just come, stun you, Thunder Fury proc, Holy Shock, Judgment, bam, you are at 20%, dude. Like for real. Especially if he's gonna be having good gear, then you might even die. So I definitely think that Shokadin a very interesting build. I've also seen other build that was kind of called, it was just like Ela Enha. What it basically means is that you're having in the enhancement tree the talent for dual wield, but you are also more into elemental. So when you're in range, you're doing elemental DPS, but then you come closer, you switch to a two-handed mace, and then you are just melee hitting for the Wind Fury proc. So you are basically kind of like elemental Enha. In the range, you are having spell damage, shield, DPS. In the close range, you are switching to Wind Fury, bam. This build should be played with rank 14 gear, because the rank 14 gear is giving you strength, agility, but also spell damage and healing. So that's why I think it's viable, and I've seen some videos. I think it's from Executus Gaming. Just try to like find like Enha. Is it like personal Enha build or something like that? I don't know. But Executus Gaming, fellas, please go into the description, leave a like on this video. You can find the link to the original video in the description. Leave a like and subscribe to Metagoblin. Also, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and write me in the comment what am I supposed to check in the next video, and I will check it out. Please just subscribe and leave a like. It really helps the algorithm, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.